Welcome back to the second course lecture of this intro module. So let me start by saying a few general things about the two novels and the times during which they were produced. Now, the two classic Chinese novels at the heart of this class date from the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644, which is generally considered to be one of the golden ages in Chinese history. By standard criteria such as size, population, agriculture, commerce, wealth, sophistication, technology, military might, cuisine, learning, literature, and the fine arts, the Ming Dynasty presided over the greatest nation in the world at the time. And here you have a map of the Ming Dynasty superimposed on a map of China today. So you see, it was quite a bit smaller than China today, but still, it was the most populous nation at the time and the strongest economy and just a shining empire. Now, the Ming Dynasty is best remembered for the impressive achievements of the founding generation, whose political and military success were accompanied by impressive cultural and literary accomplishments. So here you have an image of the Yongle Emperor, the third Ming ruler, who established Beijing as the secondary capital, constructed the Forbidden City. I'm sure you've all heard of that, right? The Ming Dynasty made Beijing, right, as I mentioned, the capital, and built a palace complex consisting of 9,000 rooms known as the Forbidden City. Zijincheng. During the Ming, the Grand Canal was restored and the imperial examinations for official appointments were reinstated. The study of Confucian classics became the basis for success in the ever-growing government bureaucracy. And we will be talking a lot about Confucianism, especially during our discussion of the Three Kingdoms, and we'll be talking a lot about the government bureaucracy in our discussion of the Journey to the West. Now, while the early Ming was an agrarian empire, it also had dense urban centers where commerce and industrial production was thriving, and that continued to expand throughout the Ming. Domestic and external trade was highly developed, with the main commodities being rice, cotton, tea, raw silk, textiles, and porcelain. And if you are into porcelain or ceramics, you might have seen the Ming Dynasty cobalt blue and white porcelain from the kilns of Jingdezhen in Jiangxi province, which were exported to markets all over Asia and even Europe. Now, also during the Ming, printing and book production flourished. An estimated 10% of the male population during the late Ming had attained a high level of education and hence literacy. And this was actually observed by a famous Italian Jesuit named Matteo Ricci, who served the Ming emperors. It's a long story how he got there, and if you're curious, we can discuss that during our discussion session. And he was really impressed by the level of learning and literacy in China at the time, and he marveled at the ready availability of books. So he reported around 1600 the vast numbers of books in circulation in China and the ridiculously low prices at which they are sold. One publisher was producing 600 different titles with 100,000 wooden printing blocks. So the books were printed from blocks onto which the characters were carved. And generally books were printed on one side of thin paper and folded to form a book. Here you have a woodblock print actually of the making of paper, which of course was the most important commodity for making books. And here you have a book. So this is actually a later novel, Hong Lou Meng, Dream of the Red Chamber. I'll say a few words about that in a minute, but you can see, right? So it's bound here, and right, each page would be folded here. And here sort of you can see this is the printing block, right? And here it's folded. Now, at the height of the Ming Dynasty, during the 100-odd years from the Hongzhi reign period until about halfway through the Wanli reign period, 4 of the most beloved works of traditional Chinese fiction came into circulation in their most fully developed forms. Three Kingdoms, 三国演义, of course, is one of them. It's a historic knight-errant epic about retribution and intrigue set at the end of the Han Dynasty. Another one is The Water Margin, also known as All Men Are Brothers, 水浒传, a Robin Hood saga about a band of outlaws. And then there is The Journey to the West, right? Another one of the two novels we'll be reading, also known as Monkey, a fantasy novel based on the historic travels of a Chinese Buddhist monk to India. So it merges fantasy and the real accounts of this monk. And then there's The Plum in the Golden Vase, 金瓶梅, a novel of manners about social customs, conventions, and habits of the merchant class, and that was often branded as pornographic and hence often censored. Now, none of these 16th century editions is an entirely original literary creation. Rather, each represents the culmination of a long prior and subsequent history of source materials, antecedent narratives, and alternate recensions, especially drawing on earlier prompt books or 画本 used by storytellers. So what that means is that none of these books were written at a certain point by one author, but they all draw on a lot of source materials, and all four are to some degree based on real events, real people, real places. But they were finalized in the way that we read them now in the late 15th and 16th century. These four novels came to function as models for the subsequent development of full-length Chinese fiction, 小说, or what is today commonly called the traditional Chinese novel. Now, during the next dynasty, the Qing dynasty, which was also the last dynasty, 1644 to 1911, these four novels were joined by two more, The Scholars, or 儒林外史, a satire of officialdom, and The Dream of the Red Chamber, 红楼梦. We just saw that beautiful old print edition there, right, a couple of slides ago. A saga about the rise and fall of a prominent family to form the so-called six classic novels. Now, ever since their initial publication, episodes from these six novels have been adapted for popular culture in the theater and performing arts, puppet theater and shadow plays, music and poetry, painting and woodblock printing. And more recently, they have been reimagined and reinterpreted through cinema, television dramas, comic books, and computer games. And here I'm just showing you a few examples of a manga, a computer game, and a movie. Now, in the first course lecture of the first real module of this class, I'm going to introduce you to our first novel, The Three Kingdoms. But to give you just a little idea of what to expect, I'm going to show you the trailer for this movie here, Red Cliff, which is based on one episode from that wonderful novel. And I will see you in the next course lecture.
In a country shaken by years of civil war, a powerful warlord's quest for domination threatens all who stand in his way. Now, the destiny of an empire and the fate of millions will depend on the fight of a few. John Woo. Comes a new epic like no other. Redcliffe, a John Woo film.